Welcome to the Books of Skyrim. Today we are going to read about the real Barenziah. And we're going to ignore Serena's attitude and her look and her pacing. And we'll get right into the books. We're going to read the 5 volumes of the real Barenziah. Now here it says it's written by Anonymous, but I have inside information that knows that this 5-volume book is written by a guy named Plintius Merrill. He's basically a secretary, and in the Tribunal expansion of Morrowind, you actually get to meet him, and he was a friend of Barenziah, and later becomes an employee when she saves his life. Well, let's read the book, The Real Barenziah, Volume 1. 500 years ago, in Mournhold, City of Gems, there lived a blind widow and her only child, a tall, strapping young man. He was a miner, as was his father before him, a common laborer in the mines of the Lord of Mournhold. For his ability in magicka was small. The work was honorable, but paid poorly. His mother made and sold comberry cakes at the city market to help eke out their living. They did well enough, she said. They had enough to fill their bellies. No one could wear more than one suit of clothing at a time, and the roof leaked only when it rained. But Symmachus would have liked more. He hoped for a lucky strike at the mines, which would garner him a large bonus. In his free hours, he enjoyed hoisting a mug of ale in the tavern with his friends and gambling with them at cards. He also drew the eyes and sighs of more than one pretty elven lass, although none held his interest for long. He was a typical young dark elf of peasant descent, remarkable only for his size. It was rumored that he had a bit of Nordic blood in him. In Symmachus's 30th year, there was a great rejoicing in Mournhold. A girl child had been born to the Lord and Lady, a queen. The people sang, "A queen is born to us." For among the people of Mournhold, the birth of an heiress is a sure sign of future peace and prosperity. When the time came round for the royal child's rite of naming, the mines were closed and Symmachus dashed home to bathe and dress in his best. "I'll rush straight home and tell you all about it," he promised his mother, who would not be able to attend. She had been alien, and besides, there would be a great crush of people, as all Mournhold turned out to be part of the blessed event. And being blind, she would be unable to see anything anyways. "My son," she said, "afore you go, fetch me a priest or a healer, else I may pass from the mortal plane ere you return." Symmachus crossed to her pallet at once and noted anxiously that her forehead was very hot and her breathing shallow. He pried loose a slat of the wooden floor under which their small hoard of savings was kept. There wasn't nearly enough to pay a priest for healing. He would have to give what they had and owe the rest. Symmachus snatched up his cloak and hurried away. The streets were full of folk hurrying to the sacred grove, but the temples were locked and barred. "Closed for the ceremony," read all the signs. Excuse me. Symmachus elbowed his way through the mob and managed to overtake a brown-robed priest. "After the rite, brother," the priest said, "if you have gold, I shall gladly attend to your mother. My lord has bidden all clerics attend, and I, for one, have no wish to offend him." "My mother's desperately ill," Symmachus pled. Surely my lord will not miss one lowly priest. True, but the archcanon will, the priest said nervously, tearing his robe loose from Samaka's desperate grip and vanishing into the crowd. Samaka's tried other priests and even a few mages, but with no better result. Almost armored guards marched through the street and pushed him aside with their lances, and Samaka's realized that the royal procession was approaching. As the carriage bearing the city's ruler drew abreast, Samaka rushed out from the crowd and shouted, my lord, my mother's dying." "I forbid her to do so on this glorious night," the lord shouted, laughing and scattering coin into the throng. Samaka was close enough to smell wine on the royal breath. On the other side of the carriage, his lady clutched the babe to her breast and stared slit-eyed at Samaka. Her nostrils flared in disdain. "Guards," she cried, "remove this oaf." Rough hands seized Samaka. He was beaten and left dazed by the side of the road. Samaka, head aching, followed in the wake of the crowd and witnessed the rite of naming from the top of a hill. He could see the brown-robed clerics and the blue-robed mages gathered near the high-born folk far below. Barenziah. The name came dimly to Samaka's ears, as a high priest lifted the swaddled babe and proffered her to the twin moons on either side of the horizon. Joan rising, Jode setting. Behold the Lady Barenziah, born to the land of Mournhold. Grant her thy blessing and thy counsel, ye kind gods, that she may ever rule well over Mournhold, its ken and its weal, its kith and its ilk. Bless her, all the people intoned along with their lord and lady, hands upraised. Only Samaka stood silent, head bowed, knowing in his heart that his dear mother was gone, and in silence he swore a mighty oath that he should be his lord's bane, and in vengeance for his mother's needless death, the child Barenziah should have for his own bride, and that his mother's grandchildren should be born to rule over Mournhold. After this ceremony, he watched impassively as the royal procession returned to the palace. He saw the priest to whom he first spoken. The man came gladly enough now in return for the gold Samaka's had, and a promise of more afterward. They found his mother dead. The priest sighed and tucked the pouch of gold coins away. "I'm sorry, brother, it's all right. You can forget the rest of the gold. There's aught I can do here. Likely." "Give me back my money," Samaka snarled. "You've done naught to earn it." He lifted his right arm threateningly. The priest backed away, about to utter a curse, but Samaka struck him across the face before more than 3 words had left his mouth. He went down heavily, striking his head sharply on one of the stones that formed the fire pit. He died instantly. Samaka snatched up the gold and fled the city. As he ran, he muttered one word over and over like a sorcerer's chant. "Barenziah," he said. "Barenziah, Barenziah." Barenziah stood on one of the balconies of the palace, staring down into the courtyard where soldiers milled, dazzling in their armor. Presently they formed into ordered ranks and cheered as her parents, the lord and lady, emerged from the palace, clad from head to toe in ebony armor, long purple-dyed fur cloaks flowing behind. Splendidly caparisoned, shining black horses were brought for them, and they mounted and rode to the courtyard gates and turned to salute her. "Barenziah," they cried, "Barenziah, our beloved, farewell." The little girl blinked back tears and waved one hand bravely. Her favorite stuffed animal, a gray wolf cub she called Woofin, clutched to her breast with the other. She had never been parted from her parents before and had no idea what it meant, save that there was war in the west and the name Tiber Septim was on everyone's lips. spoken in hate and dread. Barenziah, the soldiers cried, lifting their lances and swords and bows. Then their dear parents turned and rode away, knights trailing in their wake, until the courtyard was nearly emptied. Sometime after came a day when Barenziah was shaken awake by her nurse, dressed hurriedly, and borne from the palace. All she could remember of that dreadful time was seeing a huge shadow with burning eyes filling the sky. She was passed from hand to hand. Foreign soldiers appeared, disappeared, and sometimes reappeared. Her nurse vanished and was replaced by strangers, some more strangers than others. There were days, or it may have been weeks, of travel. One morning she awoke to step out of the coach into a cold place with a large grey stone castle amid empty, endless grey-green hills, covered patchily with grey-white snow. She clutched Wolfen to her breast in both hands and stood blinking and shivering in the grey dawn, feeling very small and very dark in all this endless space, this endless grey-white space. She and Hannah, a brown-skinned, black-haired maid who had been traveling with her for several days, went inside the keep. A large grey-white woman with icy grey golden hair was standing by a hearth in one of the rooms. She stared at Barenziah with dreadful, bright blue eyes. "She's very black, isn't she?" the woman remarked to Hannah. "I've never seen a dark elf before." "I don't know much about them myself, milady," Hannah said, "but this one's got red hair and a temper to match. I can tell you that. Take care, she bites, and worse." "I'll soon train her out of that," the other woman sniffed. "And what's that filthy thing she's got?" Ugh! The woman snatched Wolfen away and threw him into the blazing hearth. Barenziah shrieked and would have flung herself after him, but was held back despite her attempts to bite and claw at her captors. Poor Wolfen was reduced to a tiny heap of charred ash. Barenziah grew like a weed transplanted to a Skyrim garden, a ward of Count Sven and his wife, Lady Inga. Outwardly, that is, she thrived, but always there was a cold and empty place within. "I've raised her as my own daughter," Lady Inga was wont to sigh as she sat gossiping when neighboring ladies came to visit. "But she's a dark elf, what can you expect?" Barenziah was not meant to overhear these words. At least she thought she was not. Her hearing was keener than that of her Nordic host. Other, less desirable dark elven traits evidently included pilfering, lying, and a little misplaced magic. Just a small fire spell here and a little levitation spell there. And as she grew older, a keen interest in boys and men who could provide very pleasant sensations, and to her astonishment, gifts as well. Inga disapproved of this last for reasons incomprehensible to Barenziah, so she was careful to keep it as a secret as possible. "She's wonderful with the children," Inga added, referring to her 5 sons, all younger than Barenziah. "I don't think she ever let them come to harm." A tutor had been hired when Johnny was 6 and Barenziah 8, and they took their lessons together. She would have liked to train in arms as well, but the very idea scandalized Count Sven and Lady Inga. So Barenziah was given a small bow and allowed to play at target shooting with the boys. She watched them at arms practice when she could, sparred with them when no grown-up folk were about, and knew she was good as or better than they. "She's very proud, though, isn't she?" one of the ladies would whisper to Inga, and Barenziah, pretending not to hear, would nod silently in agreement. She could not help but feel superior to the Count and his lady. There was something about them that provoked contempt. Afterwards, she came to learn that Sven and Inga were distant cousins of Darkmoor Keep's last titled residents, and she finally understood. They were posers, impostors, not rulers at all. At least they were not raised to rule. This thought made her strangely furious at them, a good clean hatred quite detached from resentment. She came to see them as disgusting and repellent insects who could be despised, but never feared. Once a month, a courier came from the emperor, bringing a small bag of gold for Sven and Inga and a large bag of dried mushrooms for Morrowind for Barenziah, her favorite treat. On these occasions, she was always made to look presentable, or at least as presentable as a skinny dark elf could be made to look in Inga's eyes, before being summoned into the courier's presence for a brief interview. The same courier seldom came twice, but all of them looked her over in much the same way. A farmer would look over a hog he was readying for market. In the spring of her 16th year, Barenziah thought the courier looked as if she were at least ready for market. Upon reflection, she decided she did not wish to be marketed. The stable boy Straw, a big, muscular, blond lad, clumsy, gentle, affectionate, and rather simple, had been urging her to run off for some weeks now. Barenziah stole the bag of gold the courier had left, took the mushrooms from the storeroom, disguised herself as a boy in one of Johnny's old tunics and a pair of his cast-off breeches. And on one fine spring night, she and Straw took the two best horses from the stable and rode hard through the night toward Whiterun, the nearest city of any importance, and the place where Straw wanted to be. But Mournhold and Morrowind also lay eastward, and they drew Barenziah as a lodestone draws iron. In the morning they abandoned the horses at Barenziah's insistence. She knew they would be missed and tracked down, and she hoped to throw off any pursuers. They continued on foot until late afternoon, keeping to the side roads, and slept for several hours in an abandoned hut. They went on at dusk and came to Whiterun city gates just before dawn. Barenziah had prepared a pass of sorts for Straw, a makeshift document stating an errand to a temple in the city for a local village lord. She herself glided over the wall with the help of a levitation spell. She had reasoned correctly, as it turned out that by now the gate guards would have been alerted to keep an eye out for a young dark elven girl and a Nordic boy traveling together. On the other hand, unaccompanied country yokels like Straw were a common enough sight. Alone and with papers, it was unlikely that he would draw attention. Her simple plan went smoothly. She met Straw at the temple, which was not far from the gate. She had been to Whiterun on a few previous occasions. Straw, however, had never been more than a few miles from Sven's estate, which was his birthplace. Together they made their way to a rundown inn in the poor quarters of Whiterun, gloved, cloaked, and hooded against the morning chill. Barenziah's dark skin and red eyes were not apparent, and no one paid any heed to them. They entered the inn separately. Straw paid the innkeeper for a single cubicle, an immense meal, and 2 jugs of ale. Barenziah sneaked in a few minutes later. They ate and drank together, gleefully rejoicing in their escape, and made love vigorously on the narrow cot. Afterward they fell into an exhausted, dreamless sleep. They stayed for a week at Whiterun. Straw earned a bit of money running errands, and Barenziah burgled a few houses at night. She continued to dress as a boy. She cut her hair short and dyed her flame-red tresses jet black to further the disguise, and kept out of sight as much as possible. There were few dark elves in Whiterun. One day Straw got them work as temporary guards for a merchant caravan traveling east. The one-armed sergeant looked her over dubiously. Heh, he chuckled. Dark elf, ain't ya? Like setting a wolf to guard the sheep, that is. Still, I need arms, and we ain't going near enough Morrowind so you can betray us to your folk. Or homegrown bandits would as fain cut your throat as mine. The sergeant turned to give Straw an appraising look, then he spun back abruptly towards Barenziah, whipped out his short sword, but she had her dagger out in the twinkling of an eye and was in a defensive stance. Straw drew his own knife and circled around to the man's rear. The sergeant dropped his blade and chuckled again. Not bad, kids, not bad. How are ye with yon bow, Dark Elf? Barenziah demonstrated her prowess briefly. Aye, not bad at all. And ye be keen of eye by night, boy, and of hearing tall times. A trusty Dark Elf makes a fighting man, as any could ask for, I know. I served under Symmachus himself afore I lost this arm and got invalided out of the Emperor's army. We could betray them, I know, folk who paid well, Straw said later as they bedded down for the last night at the ramshackle lodge, or rob them ourselves. They're very rich, these merchants are. Barenziah laughed. Whatever would we do with so much money? And besides, we need their protection for traveling quite as much as they need ours. We could buy a little farm, you and me, Barry, and settle down all nice-like. Peasants, Barenziah thought scornfully. Straw was a peasant, and harbored nothing but peasant dreams. But all she said was, not here, Straw. We're too close to Darkmoor still. We'll have other chances farther east. The caravan went only as far east as Sungard. The Emperor Tiber Septim I had done much in the way of building relatively safe and regularly patrolled highways, but the tolls were steep, and this particular caravan kept to the side roads as much as possible to avoid them. This exposed them to the hazards of wayside robbers, both human and orcish, and roving brigand bands of various races, but such were the perils of trade and profit. They had 2 such encounters before reaching Sungard, an ambush which Barenziah's keen ears warned them of in plenty of time for them to circle about and surprise the lurkers, and a night attack by a mixed band of Khajiit, humans, and wood elves. The latter were a skilled band, and even Barenziah did not hear them sneaking up in time to give much warning. This time the fighting was fierce. The attackers were driven off, but 2 of the caravan's other guards were slain, and Straw got a nasty cut in his thigh before he and Barenziah managed to gash his Khajiit assailant's throat. Barenziah rather enjoyed the life. The garrulous sergeant had taken a liking to her, and she spent most of her time evenings sitting around the campfire listening to his tales of campaigning in Morrowind with Tiber Septim and General Symmachus. This Symmachus had been made general after Mournhold fell, the sergeant said. He's a fine soldier, boy, Symmachus is. But there was more in soldiering involved in that Morrowind business, if you take my meaning. But well, you know all about that, I suspect. No, I don't remember, Barenziah said, trying to sound nonchalant. I've lived most of my life in Skyrim. My mother married a Skyrim man. They're both dead, though. Tell me what happened to the Lord and Lady of Mournhold. The sergeant shrugged. I ain't never heard. Dead, I expect. 'Twas a lot of fighting afore the armistice got signed. It's pretty quiet now, maybe too quiet, like a calm afore the storm. Say, boy, you going back there? Maybe, Barenziah said. The truth was that she was drawn irresistibly to Morrowind and Mournhold, like a moth to a burning house. Straw sensed it and was unhappy about it. He was unhappy anyway, since they could not bed together, as she was supposed to be a boy. Barenziah rather missed it too, but not as much as Straw did, seemingly. The sergeant wanted them to sign on for the return trip, but gave them a bonus nonetheless when they turned the offer down, and parchments of recommendation. Straw wanted to settle down permanently near Sungard, but Barenziah insisted on continuing their travels east. I'm the Queen of Mournhold by rights, he said, unsure whether it was true or was it just a daydream she had made up as a lost, bewildered child. I want to go home. I need to go home. That's at least what's true. After a few weeks, they managed to get places in another caravan heading east. By early winter, they were at Riften and nearing the Morrowind border. But the weather had grown severe as the days passed, and they were told no merchant caravans would be setting forth till mid-spring. Barenziah stood on top of the city walls and stared across the deep gorge that separated Riften from the snow-clad mountain walls guarding Morrowind beyond. Barry, Straw said gently, Mournhold's a long way off yet, nearly as far as we've come already, and the lands between are wild, full of wolves and bandits and orcs and still worse creatures. We'll have to wait for spring. There's Silgrad Tower, Barry said, referring to the dark elven township that had grown up around an ancient minaret guarding the border between Skyrim and Morrowind. The bridge guards won't let me across, Barry. They've cracked Imperial troops. They can't be bribed. If you go alone. I won't try and stop you, but what will you do? Silgrad Tower is full of Imperial soldiers. Will you become a washing woman for them, or a camp follower? No, Barenziah said slowly, thoughtfully. Actually, the idea was not entirely unappealing. She was sure she could earn a modest living by sleeping with the soldiers. She had a few adventures of that sort as they crossed Skyrim when she dressed as a woman and slipped away from Straw. She'd only been looking for a bit of variety. Straw was sweet but dull. She'd been startled but extremely pleased when the men she picked up offered her money afterwards. Straw had been unhappy about it, though, and would shout for a while then sulk for days afterwards if he caught her at it. He was quite jealous. He even threatened to leave her. Not that he ever did, or could. But the Imperial Guards were a tough and brutal lot by all accounts, and Barenziah had heard some very ugly stories during their treks. The ugliest of them, by far, had come from the lips of an ex-army veterans around the caravan campfire, and were proudly recounted. They had been trying to shock her and Straw, she realized, but she also comprehended that there was some truth behind the wild tales. Straw hated that kind of dirty talk, and hated it more than she had to hear it. But there was a part of him that was fascinated nevertheless. Barenziah sensed this and had encouraged Straw to seek out other women, but he said he didn't want anyone else but her. She told him candidly she didn't feel that way about him, but she did like him better than anyone else. Then why do you go with other men? Straw had asked on one occasion. I don't know. Straw sighed. They say dark elven women are like that. Barenziah smiled and shrugged. I don't know. Or no, maybe I do. Yes, I do know. She turned and kissed him affectionately. I guess that's all the explanation there is. Oh, so the early life of Barenziah. That was part 1. And now we read part 2, which may be all we get to read in this episode. The Real Barenziah, Volume 2. Barenziah and Straw settled in Riften for the winter, taking a cheap room in the slummier section of town. Barenziah wanted to join the Thieves Guild, knowing there would be trouble if she were caught freelancing. One day in a barroom, she got the eye of a known member of the guild, a bold young Khajiit named Theris. She offered to bet him if he would sponsor her membership. He looked her over, grinning, and agreed, but said she'd still have to pass an initiation. What sort of initiation? Ah, Theris said, pay up first, sweetness. This passage has been censored by order of the temple. Okay. Straw was going to kill her, and maybe Theris too. What in Tamriel had possessed her to do such a thing? She cast an apprehensive look around the room, but the other patrons had lost interest and gone back to their own business. She did not recognize any of them. This was an inn where she and Straw were staying. With luck, it'd be a while or never before Straw found out. Theris was by far the most exciting and attractive man she had yet met. He not only told her about the skills she needed to become a member of the Thieves Guild, but also trained her in them himself, or else introduced her to people who could. Among these was a woman who knew something about magic. Katisha was a plump and matronly Nord. She was married to a smith, had 2 teenage children, and was perfectly ordinary and respectable, except that she was very fond of cats, and by logical inference, their humanoid counterparts, the Khajiit, had a talent for certain kinds of magic and cultivated rather odd friends. She taught Barenziah an invisibility spell and schooled her in other forms of stealth and disguise. Katisha mingled magical and non-magical talents freely, using one set to enhance the other. She was not a member of the Thieves Guild, but was fond of Theris in a motherly sort of way. Barenziah warmed to her as she never had towards any woman, and over the next few weeks she told Katisha all about herself. She brought Straw there too sometimes. Straw approved of Katisha, but not of Theris. Theris found Straw interesting and suggested to Barenziah that they arrange what he called a threesome. Absolutely not, Barenziah said firmly, grateful that Theris had broached the subject in private for once. He wouldn't like it. I wouldn't like it. Theris smiled his charming, triangular feline smile and sprawled lazily on his chair, stretching his limbs and curling his tail. You might be surprised, both of you. Pairing is so boring. Barenziah answered him with a glare. Or maybe you wouldn't like it with that country bumpkin of yours, sweetness. Would you mind if I brought along another friend? Yes, I would. If you're bored with me, you and your friend can find someone else. She was a member of the Thieves Guild now. She had passed their initiation. She had found Theris useful, but not essential. Maybe she was a bit bored with him too. She talked to Katisha about her problems with men, or what she thought of as her problems with men. Katisha shook her head and told her she was looking for love, not sex, that she'd know the right man when she found him, that neither Straw nor Theris was the right one for her. Barenziah cocked her head to one side quizzically. They said dark elven women are pro something? Prostitutes? She said, although she was dubious. You mean promiscuous? Although some do become prostitutes, I suppose, Katisha said, as an afterthought. Elves are promiscuous when they're young, but you'll grow out of it. Perhaps you beginning to already, she added hopefully. She liked Barenziah, had grown to be quite fond of her. You ought to meet some nice elven boys. Though if you go on keeping company with Gajits and humans and what have you, you'll find yourself pregnant in next to no time. Barenziah smiled involuntarily at the thought. I like that, I think. But it'd be inconvenient, wouldn't it? Baby's a lot of trouble, and I don't even have my own house yet. How old are you, Barry? 17? Well, you have a year or two yet before you're fertile, unless you're very unlucky. Elves don't have children readily with other elves after that. Even so, you'll be alright if you stick with them. Barenziah remembered something else. Straw wants to buy a farm and marry me. Is that what you want? No, not yet. Maybe someday. Yes, someday. But not if I can't be queen. And not just any queen. The Queen of Mournhold, she said, just determinedly, almost stubbornly, as if it drowned out any doubt. Katisha chose to ignore this last comment. She was amused at the girl's hyperactive imagination, took it as a sign of a well-functioning mind. I think Straw will be a very old man before someday comes, Barry. Elves live for a very long time. Katisha's face briefly wore the envious, wistful look humans got when contemplating the 1,000-year lifespan elves have been granted by the gods. True, few have ever actually lived that long as disease and violence took their respective tolls. But they could, and one or two of them actually did. I like old men too, Barry said. Katisha laughed. Barenziah fidgeted impatiently while Theris sorted through the papers on the desk. He was being meticulous and methodical, carefully replacing everything just as he found it. They broke it into a nobleman's household, leaving Straw to hover outside as lookout. Theris had said it was a simple job, but very hush-hush, for he hadn't even wanted to bring any other guild members along. He said he knew he could trust Barry and Straw, but no one else. Tell me what you're looking for and I'll find it, Barry whispered urgently. Theris's night sight wasn't as good as hers, and he didn't want her to magic up even a small orb of light. She had never been in such a luxurious place. Not even the Darkmoor castle of Count Sven and Lady Inga, where she had spent her childhood, compared to it. She gazed around in wonder as they made their way through the ornately decorated and usually echoing downstairs rooms. But Theris didn't seem interested in anything but the desk in the small book-lined study on the upper floor. Tss, he hissed angrily. Someone's coming, Barry said. A moment before the door opened and two dark figures stepped into the room. Theris gave her a violent shove towards them and sprang to the window. Barenziah's muscles went rigid. She couldn't move or even speak. She watched helplessly as one of the figures, the smaller one, leaped after Theris. There were two quick, silent jabs of blue light, and then Theris folded over into a still heap. Outside the study, the house had become alive with hastening footsteps and voices calling an alarm, and the clank of armor hurriedly put on. The bigger man, a dark elf, by the looks of him, half lifted, half dragged Theris to the door and thrust him into the waiting arms of another elf. A jerk of the first elf's head sent his smaller blue-robed companion after them. Then he sauntered over to inspect Barenziah, who was once again able to move, although her head throbbed maddeningly when she tried to. Open your shirt, Barenziah, the elf said. Barenziah gawked at him and clutched it close. You're a girl, aren't you, Barry? He said softly. You should have stopped dressing as a boy months ago, you know. You're only drawing attention to yourself, and calling yourself Barry? Is your friend Straw too stupid to remember anything else? It's a common elven name, Barenziah defended. The man shook his head sadly. Not among dark elves it isn't, my dear. But you wouldn't know much about dark elves, would you? I regret that, but it couldn't be helped. No matter, I shall try to remedy it. Who are you? Barenziah demanded. So much for fame. The man struggled, smiling wryly. I am Symmachus, my lady Barenziah, General Symmachus of his awesome and terrible majesty, Tiber Septim's imperial army. And I must say, it's a merry chase you've led me throughout Tamriel. Or this part of it anyways, although I guessed correctly that you'd head for Morrowind eventually. You had a bit of luck. A body was found in Whiterun that was thought to be Straw's. So we stopped looking for the pair of you. That was careless of me. Yet I'd not have thought of you'd have stayed together this long. Where is he? Is he all right? She asked in genuine trepidation. Oh, he's fine for now. In custody, of course. He turned away. You care for him, then? He said, and then suddenly stared at her with fierce curiosity, out of red eyes that seemed strange to her except in her own seldom-seen reflection. He's my friend, Barenziah said. The words came out in a tone that sounded dull and helpless to her own ears. Symmachus, a general of the Imperial Army no less, said to have the friendship and ears of Tiber Septim himself. Aye, you seem to have several unsuitable friends, if you'll forgive me saying so, milady. Stop calling me that. She was irritated at the General's seeming sarcasm, but he only smiled. As they talked, the bustle and flurry in the house died away, although she could still hear people, presumably the residents, whispering together not far off. The tall elf perched himself on a corner of the desk. He seemed quite relaxed and prepared to stay a while. Then it occurred to her several unsuitable friends, had he said. This man knew all about her, or seemed to know enough anyways, which amounted to the same thing. What's going to happen to me? To me? As you know, this house belongs to the commander of the Imperial troops in this area, which means to say that it belongs to me. Barenziah gasped, and Symmachus looked up sharply. What? You didn't know? Why are you rash, milady? Even for 17, you must always know what it is you do or get yourself into. But the guild wouldn't have. Barenziah was trembling. The Thieves' Guild would never have attempted a mission that crossed imperial policy. No one dared oppose Tiber Septim, at least no one she knew of. Someone at the guild had bungled badly, and now she was going to pay for it. I dare say it's unlikely that there is a guild approval for this. In fact, I wonder. Symmachus examined the desk carefully, pulling out drawers. He selected one, placed it on top of the desk, and removed the false bottom. There was a folded sheet of parchment inside. It seemed to be a map of some sort. Barenziah edged closer. Symmachus held... Symmachus held it away from her, laughing. Rash indeed. He glanced it over and then folded and replaced it. You advised me a moment ago to seek after knowledge. So I did. Suddenly he seemed to be in a high good humor. We must be going, my dear lady. He shepherded her to the door, down the stairs, and out into the night air. No one was about. Barenziah's eyes darted towards the shadows. She wondered if she could outrun him or elude him somehow. You're not thinking of attempting to escape, are you? Aye, Don't you want to hear first what my plans for you are?" She thought that he sounded a bit hurt. Now that you mention it, yes. Perhaps you'd rather hear about your friends first." "No." He looked gratified at this. It was evidently the answer he wanted, thought Barenziah, but it was also the truth. While she was concerned for her friends, especially Straw, she was far more concerned for herself. "You will take your place as the rightful queen of Mournhold." Excuse me. Symmachus explained that this has been his and Tiber Septim's plan for her all along, that Mournhold, which had been under military rule for the dozen or so years since she had been away, was gradually to be returned to civilian government, under the Empire's guidance, of course, and as part of the imperial province of Morrowind. "But why was I sent to Darkmoor?" Barenziah asked, hardly believing anything she had just been told. "For safekeeping, naturally. Why did you run away?" Barenziah shrugged. "I saw no reason to stay. I should have been told." "You would have been by now. I had, in fact, sent for you to be removed to the Imperial City to spend some time as part of the Emperor's household. But of course, you had, shall we say, absconded by then. As for your destiny, it should be, and should have been, quite obvious to you. Tiber Septim does not keep those he has no use for. And what else could you be that would be of use to him?" "I know nothing of him, nor, for that matter, of you." "Then know this, Tiber Septim rewards friends and foes alike according to the deserts." Barenziah chewed on that for a few moments. "Straw has deserved well of me and has never done anyone any harm. He is not a member of the Thieves' Guild. He came along to protect me. He earns our keep by running errands." And Symmachus waved her impatiently and silenced her. "Hi, I know all about Strong," he said, "and about Theris." He stared at her intently. "So what would you?" She took a deep breath. "Strong wants a little farm. If I'm to be rich, then I would like for one to be given to him." "Very well." He seemed astonished at this, and then pleased. "Done. He shall have it. And Theris?" "He betrayed me," Barenziah said coldly. Theris should have told her what risk the job entailed. Besides, he pushed her right into the enemy's arms in an attempt to save himself. Not a man to be rewarded. Not, in fact, a man to be trusted. "Yes, and?" "Well, he should be made to suffer for it, shouldn't he?" "That seems reasonable. What form should say suffering take?" Barenziah balled her hands into fists. She would have liked a beaten claw at the Khajiit herself, but considering the turning events had taken, that didn't seem very queenly. A whipping? Would 20 stripes be too many, do you think? I don't want to do him any permanent injury, you understand? Just teach him a lesson. "Aye, of course," Symmachus grinned at this. Then his features suddenly set and became serious. "It shall be done, your highness, milady, Queen Barenziah of Mournhold." And then he bowed. To her, a sweeping, courtly, ridiculously wonderful bow. Barenziah's heart leapt. She spent 2 days at Symmachus's apartment, during which she was kept very busy. There was a dark elven woman named Drelaline, who saw to her needs, although she did not exactly seem a servant since she took her meals with them. Nor did she seem to be Symmachus's wife or lover. Drelaline looked amused when Barenziah asked her about it. She simply said she was in the general's employ and did whatever he asked of her. With Drelaline's assistance, several fine gowns and pairs of shoes were ordered for her, plus a riding habit and boots along with other small necessities. Barenziah was given a room to herself. Symmachus was out a great deal. She saw him at most meal times, but he said little about himself or what he'd been doing. He was cordial and polite, quite willing to converse on most subjects, and seemed interested in anything she had to say. Drellerline was much the same. Barenziah found them pleasant enough, but hard to get to know. As Katisha would have put it, she felt an odd twinge of disappointment. These were the first dark owls with whom she associated closely. She had expected to feel comfortable with them, to feel at last that she belonged somewhere with somebody, as part of something. Instead, she found herself yearning for her Nordic friends, Katisha and Straw. When Symmachus told her they were to set out for the imperial city on the morrow, she asked if she could say goodbye to them. Katisha? He asked. Aye. But then I suppose I owe her something. So she it was who led me to you by telling me of a lonely, dark elven girl named Barry who needed elven friends, and who sometimes dressed as a boy. She has no association with the Thieves Guild, apparently, and no one associated with the Thieves Guild seems to know your true identity, saying Theris. That as well, I prefer that your former guild membership not be made public knowledge. Please speak of it to no one, your highness. Such a past does not become an imperial queen. No one knows but Straw and Theris, and they won't tell anyone. No, he smiled a curious little smile. No, they won't. He didn't know that Katisha knew then, but still, there was something about the way he said it. Straw came to their apartment on the morning of their departure. They were left alone in the salon, although Barenziah knew that other owls were within earshot. She looked drawn and pale. They hugged one another silently for a few minutes. Straw's shoulders were shaking and tears were rolling down his cheeks, but he said nothing. Barenziah tried to smile. So we both get what we want, eh? I'm to be Queen of Mournhold, and you'll be lord of your own farmstead. She took his hand, smiled at him warmly, genuinely. I'll write you, Straw, I promise. You must find a scribe so you can write me too. Straw shook his head sadly, but when Barenziah persisted, he opened his mouth and pointed at it, making inarticulate noises. Then she realized what it was. His tongue was gone, had been cut off. Barenziah collapsed into a chair and wept noisily. But why, she demanded of Symmachus when Straw had been ushered away. Why? Symmachus shrugged. He knows too much. He could be dangerous. At least he's alive, and he won't need his tongue to raise pigs or whatever. I hate you, Barenziah screamed at him, then abruptly doubled over and vomited onto the floor. She continued to revive him between intermittent bouts of nausea. He listened stoically for some time while adrenaline cleaned up after her. Finally, he told her to cease, or he would gag her for her journey to the Emperor. They stopped at Katisha's house on the way out of the city. Symmachus and Adrenaline didn't dismount. All seemed normal, but Barenziah was frightened as she knocked on the door. Katisha answered the knock. Barenziah thanked the gods silently that at least she was all right. But she'd also obviously been weeping. In any case, she embraced Barenziah warmly. Why are you crying? Barenziah asked. For Theris, of course. You haven't heard? Oh dear, poor Theris, he's dead. Barenziah felt icy fingers creeping around her heart. He was caught stealing from the commandant's house. Poor fellow. But that was so foolish of him. Oh, Barry, he was drawn and quartered this very dawn by the commandant's order. She started to sob. I went. He asked for me. It was terrible. He suffered. So before he died, I'll never forget it. I looked for you in Straw, but no one knew where you'd both gone to. She glanced behind Barenziah. That's the Commandant, isn't it? Symmachus? Katisha did a strange thing. She stopped crying and grinned. You know, the moment I saw him, I thought, this is the one for Barenziah. Katisha took a fold of her apron and wiped it across her eyes. I told him about you, you know. Yes, Barenziah said, I know. She took Katisha's hands in each of hers and looked at her earnestly. Katisha, I love you. I'm going to miss you. But please don't ever tell anyone else anything about me. Ever. Swear you won't. Especially not to Symmachus. And look after Straw for me. Promise me that. Katisha promised, puzzled though willing. Barry, it wasn't somehow because of me that Theros was caught, was it? I never said anything about Theros to him. She glanced over at the general. Barenziah assured her that it wasn't, that an informant had told the Imperial Guard of Theros' plans, which was probably a lie, but she could see that Katisha plainly needed some kind of comfort. Oh, I'm glad of that. If I can be glad of anything just now, I'd hate to think, but how could I have known? She leaned over and whispered in Barenziah's ear. Symmachus is very handsome, don't you think? And so charming. I wouldn't know about that, Barenziah said dryly. I haven't really thought about it. There have been other things to think about, she explained hurriedly. About being Queen of Mournhold and going to live in the Imperial City for a while. He was looking for me, that's all, on orders from the Emperor. I was the object of a quest, nothing more than some sort of a goal. I don't think he thinks of me as a woman at all, he said. I didn't look like a boy, though, she added in the face Katisha's incredulity. Katisha knew that Barenziah evaluated every male she met in terms of sexual desirability and availability. I suppose it's the shock of finding out that I really am a queen, she added, and Katisha agreed that yes, that's true. That must have been something of a shock, although there was no likelihood of her experimenting firsthand. She smiled. Barenziah smiled with her. Then they hugged again tearfully for the last time. She never saw Katisha again. Or Straw. The royal party left Riften by the great southern gate. Once through, Symmachus tapped her shoulder and pointed back at the portals. I thought you might want to say goodbye to Theros too, Your Highness, he said. Barenziah stared briefly but steadily at the head impaled on a spike above the gate. The birds had been at it, but the face was still recognizable. I don't think he'll hear me, although I'm quite sure he'll be pleased to know I'm fine, she said, seeming to sound light. Let's be on our way, General, shall we? Symmachus is clearly disappointed by her lack of reaction. Aye, you've heard of this from your friend Katisha, I suppose. You suppose correctly. She attended the execution. Barenziah said casually. If he didn't know already, he'd find out soon enough, she was sure of that. Did she know Theros belonged to the guild? She shrugged. Everyone knew that. It's only lower-ranking members like me who are supposed to keep their membership secret. The ones higher up are well known. She turned to smile archly at him. But you must know all that, shouldn't you, General? She asked sweetly. He seemed unaffected by this. So you told her who you were and whence you came, but not about the guild. The guild membership was not my secret to tell. The other was. There's a difference. Besides, Katisha is a very honest woman. Had I told her, I would have lessened me in her eyes. She was always after Theros to take up a more honest line of work. I value her good opinion. She afforded him a glacial stare. Not that it's any concern of yours, but do you know what else she thought? She also thought I'd be happier if I settled down with just one man, one of my own race. One of my own race with all the right qualities. One of my own race with all the right qualities who knows to say all the right things. You, in fact. She grabbed the reins, preparatory to assuming a brisker pace, but not without sinking one final, irresistible bar. Isn't it odd how wishes come true sometimes, but not in the way you want them to? Or maybe I should say, not in the way you would ever want them to. His answer so took her by surprise that she quite forgot about cantering off. Yes, very odd, he replied, and his tone matched his words exactly. Then he excused himself and fell behind. She held her head high and urged her mount onward, trying to look unimpressed. Now what was it all about, his response that bothered her? Not what he said. No, that wasn't it. But something about the way he said it. Something about it made her think that she, Barenziah, was one of his wishes that had come true. Unlikely as this seemed, she gave it due deliberation. He had found her at last after months of searching, it seemed, under pressure from the Emperor, no doubt. So his wish had come true. Yes, that must be it. But in a way apparently not altogether to his liking. And that is the end of Volume 2. Which these are longer than I thought. So we're going to save Volume 3, 4, and maybe 5 for next time. You can move now. Oh, not right in my face. Get out of my face. Crazy vampire. Thank you for joining me for Volume 1 and 2 of The Real Barenziah. And I'll see you next time on continuing Books of Skyrim. Bye.